Good evening, welcome to Central News for Monday the 23rd of September. Tonight is the first night of our Mayoralty Candidate Special for the councils in our regions. We start off tonight with Tauranga City Council. Tauranga was given city status in 1963 and is now the 6th largest city in New Zealand. Tauranga and Mount Maunganui were amalgamated in 1989, and we don't quite have the statistics from the last census, but the population is estimated to be around 120,000. Tonight, I am joined by Tauranga Mayoralty candidates, current Mayor Stuart Crosby, Mike Baker and Richard Moore. Welcome to the show, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Tomorrow night, we will have the other three candidates, John Robson, Calvin Clout and Terry Lemming. Now, to start off, if you could each tell us all a little bit about yourself and why people should vote for you. But the catch is, you have 1 minute on the clock. So let's start off with you, Mayor Stuart Crosby.
Well, good evening. Yes, Stuart Crosby, the current Mayor of Tauranga City. I have a mix of public sector experience plus private sector experience through my own companies and other boards of directors. I always have a vision really for the city of providing for today and planning for tomorrow and making sure Tauranga is a city for all ages. I think that's incredibly important. So our population has doubled basically since 1989. It's put huge pressure on our infrastructure and delivering services. But by providing for today and planning for tomorrow, we have achieved it. Yes, there is always more to do, absolutely. But we have progressed Tauranga City, in my view, incredibly well under my mayoralty, and that's why I want to stand again.
Well, thank you very much. You came in just under 1 minute. Good on ya. And Mike, now, why do you want to become mayor?
Good evening, everyone. I was on council 2007 to 2010, and it's a huge learning curve. And during that learning curve, I realised that we need diverse qualifications on council. We need people with financial background, accounting background, people who have lived in other communities is helpful. I've been in Tauranga for 20 years, but as a former banker, I moved around the countryside a huge amount. I believe that I can make a difference to council. I'm part of a group of like-minded people who, one has accounting experience and one is a doctor of governance, which I believe are two aspects that Tauranga City Council desperately needs. It's time for change. That's why I'm standing as Mayor and also Councillor at large.
Well, thank you very much. Now, Richard, why do you want to become Mayor and why should people vote for you?
Good evening. I would like to become Mayor because I think I can make a big difference. I have a vision for Tauranga to make it a much more tourist-friendly place. I believe our youth need to get the jobs that tourism can provide. We need to make it a much more vibrant city. And also we need to get the debt down because I see debt is the big issue that is, or the big cloud that is sitting over Tauranga, almost $500 million. So I'm there to look at costs and basically try to get the city back on the right road.
Well, thank you very much to you guys. Well, but stay tuned because after the break, we talk rates and debt of the Tauranga City Council. Welcome to Central News on TV Central. We are back with 3 of the 6 candidates for Tauranga City Council Mayor. A big issue for the council, especially Tauranga, is debt. Stuart Crosby, if you were re-elected, would you address the issue of the debt?
Well, we have been addressing it. We have had a debt cap in for several years now, and that will continue. You've got to understand why we have debt. We're a rapidly growing city. We need to put infrastructure in, not just for today, but for the future. So you can't just go and build a reservoir at 2% a year, as our growth may well be. You've got to build the whole thing. And so the question is, why should the current generation of ratepayers pay for infrastructure that future generations are going to use? So we use the debt as a smoothing instrument. What people probably aren't being told is that 40% of our debt is not paid back by the ratepayers. It's paid back by user pays. So we believe we have it under control. Yes, it's an issue, as it is in Auckland, Hamilton, Tauranga, Queenstown and Lakes. Any area that's growing, they do have debt. But we have it under control, we're very much aware of it, and we've taken steps to reduce it.
Now, Mike, is Tauranga's debt something that you want to address?
Well, I believe it's actually the elephant in the room as far as the future of the city goes. the Mayor is quite correct that we've borrowed so that we can put in the infrastructure to attract the people. The major problem that we have with the debt at the current time is, whilst interest rates have fallen and we're at 50-year lows, the savings have been spent. As soon as interest rates start to rise again, the ratepayers will be forced to increase rates quite significantly. Because of the level of debt, just a 1% increase in the interest rates significantly adds to the cost to ratepayers. The debt has to be managed. There's no silver bullet. It can't be cleared. It can't be reduced. We can tinker with it by selling a few surplus assets that the city has that may not be required over the next 10, 15, 20 years. But we've just got to keep managing it and be very conscious of the fact that try and stop from increasing it much more, unless it's for a really good reason. But we've also got to remember, of course, that Tauranga is still growing.
And Richard, your answer, how would you manage debt?
Well, look, debt is a horror story at the moment. $500 million, $80,000 a day in interest payments. That's $80,000 a day that cannot be spent on the city. We have to rein in council spending. We have to make sure that we start paying the debt back, and I have plans in place to have audits to make sure that we're actually on the right track to get the debt levels down to a sustainable level.
How, debt pays for infrastructure though, and if we are a growing city, how do you pay for that
I'm not so
infrastructure?
sure actually Tauranga is growing as fast as it was. Yes, it was the fastest growing area. However, what I think has happened is that we've put in infrastructure for a city many times the size of the one we're going to have. We've jumped the gun, and therefore we've accumulated this massive debt for no real practical purpose.
Look, people are coming back. That's not true. Let's look at our building figures. 3 months ago, $36 million worth of value of work. 2 months ago, $41 million. Last month, 39. Reports in our media say sections are selling like hotcakes again. The building industry turns off real quick and it turns on real quick, and it's turning on very quick, and we are prepared for that because we invested in the essential infrastructure. If we hadn't have invested, there would have been a crisis coming, and we avoid crisis.
We do have a debt crisis now, and I think we need to have a debt crisis forum with the new council to sit down with every stakeholder in the city to make sure that we work out a way to reduce the debt levels.
I have a tendency of agreeing with Mayor Crosby in as far as, quite frankly, you can't put in 1/3 of a pipeline or half of a sewerage pipeline. I mean, the lakes development in Tauranga is massive. Obviously, the infrastructure has to be in there. The number of people that are going to be living there is going to be huge. You can't wait for the houses to arrive and then try and figure out a way of getting water to them and sewage disposal. So it is a huge cost and a huge investment. I think the good side is that potentially the bulk of the investment has already been done.
That's correct.
We've had huge infill in Tauranga. For example, down at the Mount, whereas properties, there used to just be houses, now there's apartments. So there's been huge demands on the infrastructure. The sewage, the water would have been put in all those years ago, and it would have been smaller pipes, smaller excess areas, which is a lot of that's had to be replaced. And I think we're getting on top of it, and I think that the future people coming to Tauranga will be contributing towards the cost of that infrastructure.
Just on that, Mike, I actually don't believe that the bulk has been spent, sure, but there's $250 million still to be spent on the Southern Pipeline and stormwater works. So to say that this is the end of our debt is not actually the case. We could actually be looking at $750 million in
But what
debt.
you forget is 70% of the Southern Pipeline is paid through by developers. You know, you've got to really understand the detail of our debt, not just look at it globally. And so we do act as a bank. So money comes in, money goes out. We're a growing city. It's no different to building a home and extending a home and extending a home. You can't expect to pay cash for everything. It's just unrealistic.
You can't
We're going to
keep
have to
treating-
leave it there, sorry, gentlemen, because we do have to go take a break, but we'll continue this discussion after the break. Just ahead, we continue that and we talk about the port and tourism in Tauranga. Welcome back to Central News and our Mayoralty special with the Tauranga City candidates. The Port of Tauranga is the biggest export port in the country. They keep making record profit. They employ thousands, and so does the horticultural industry in Tauranga. But do we need to, and how would you build an economy that is not solely reliable on the port or the horticultural industry? Richard, is this something that you think needs addressing?
Very much so. I believe that tourism is the way to go for Tauranga. It will provide jobs for young people, which are desperately needed. It will provide jobs for adults as well. When the university comes to Tauranga, perfect jobs, the job match. I think we also need to look at specialised industries such as the 3D metal printing industry that firms in Tauranga are actually leading the country with. And if we can back niche businesses like that, they value add, it'll be good for our economy.
And Stuart, do you think that we need to look at other industries apart from the port? Do we rely on the port too much?
No, we don't rely on the port. The port's critical for New Zealand, not just Tauranga or the Bay of Plenty. And we service it by working collaboratively with NZTA to create good roading networks to and from it. It actually doesn't employ that many people internally, but externally it does employ a lot of people through logistics and engineering. But we need a balanced economy, and we are heading towards that. You know, we do have horticulture, we have agriculture, we have forestry, we have fishing, and as Richard rightly said, we've got some really amazing innovation coming through manufacturing, and that's what we've got to be different at. There's no point trying to copy somebody else. Economic development is something I'm really passionate about, and you build on your natural strengths, which is your land and your people. And one of the key things in Tauranga is a great place for people to come and live and work. And with connectivity now through ultra-fast broadband, they can live and work here and actually generate income externally. And that's really our future.
Now, Mike, do you think that's something that the council can do?
Well, I think the port is an incredibly important part of our business. It also has the ability of attracting other industries to Tauranga, which occurs through the council-funded Priority 1, who are trying to attract new businesses. What the council has to do is ensure that there's land available for factories to be built on, large organisations, and I think that further down the track, of course, is that our reliance on the port will reduce as we get more into the educational, with hopefully the university coming to Tauranga and the CBD, and will become a very diverse economy, which will be beneficial to everybody who lives in this city.
Well, tourism is another big industry, not just in Tauranga, but in the wider Bay of Plenty. Stuart, is the council's job to create more jobs in the industry?
Our job is to create the environment that attracts more jobs, and tourism is one of them. And yes, there's a huge opportunity still untapped with regard to tourism. Our biggest problem in Tauranga City is we don't have attractions. You know, we've got a beautiful environment, but it's free. So people can get off those cruise ships, 200,000 of them. Some go to Rotorua, less than 50% now, but we don't have the attractions in Tauranga, not enough of them, to actually extract enough money out of them whilst they're here. So our biggest market is actually domestic. 90% plus is actually domestic. So we need to expand our international market. Our role in council is to make regulation more user-friendly and incentivise development for tourism.
Mike, how do you hope to boost tourism, especially, in winter months when, it's less of a desirable?
Well, that's one of the huge problems, of course, is that, you talk to moteliers and they're sitting there saying that they have the golden summer and then they have a miserable winter. And so if the council has tried in the past, they looked at expanding the hot pools to make it into a 12-month of the year experience by putting in a wellness centre, but that was turned down. So we've got to be, Tauranga's got a huge problem. It's got a fantastic climate, but in the winter, when it's a miserable day and we've got tourists in town, they hop in their cars and they go down to Rotorua, and somehow we've got to reverse that. Maybe, there are plans afoot for attractions. We desperately need a museum as long as the cost isn't fully imposed on ratepayers. We have a huge collection of treasures that are just stored and not displayed. That could be something. We have a brilliant precinct in the city that you can walk around. If the Elms, which is one of the oldest establishments, buildings in the country, and is just magnificent, but we've just got to keep building on it. And we've got to encourage people to come in and do things.
Richard, how would you try to encourage winter tourism?
Well, I think we should make Tauranga the winter arts capital of New Zealand. I think we should be having competitions, weekend competitions for photography, sculpture, and art, painting. There are prizes so that people come along, spend a couple of days in the city, 24 hours doing the work, and then 24 hours for judging and presentation of the prizes. We need to promote tourism more. It is a crucial part of our economy, and what I would like to see is actually a luge from the Papamoa Hills down. Now, we need something. We need a headline act for the city to attract people, and also to help people, families in our city, have a good time and not head down over the hills to Rotorua. So, winter arts festivals and a luge for the Papamoa Hills.
Events, Harry, are also pretty low-hanging fruit, and I've been quite frustrated with the low amount of support I get from my current councillors in terms of investment in events. For example, at the moment we've got 10,000 people in our city with the AIMS Games. These are intermediate students from mainly New Zealand, Australia, and now the Cook Islands. It's the biggest sporting event in New Zealand, and it's easy, it's low investment, high return, and that's what we've got to focus a little bit more on.
Yeah, the AIMS Games are fantastic. Tauranga is a buzz at the moment, and that's the sort of thing we should be having more of.
We do have events. I mean, I'm involved with the Jazz Society. That's the Jazz Festival at Easter each year. Attracts huge numbers of people, and is one of the oldest jazz festivals in the country. But it's a huge outlay, and we get support from the council every single year. Without that support, it would be impossible to achieve. But there's a huge demand. I mean, our budget would be in the vicinity 300,000-400,000, and depending on the headline acts, can be up to 700,000-900,000. So it's all very well to say that we've got to attract events to the city. Somehow we've also got to support the attraction of the events, because we're competing with a huge number of other communities.
Well, we're going to have to leave that there and take a break, but coming up next, we put the viewers' questions to the candidates. Welcome back to Central News and our special on the mayoralty candidates. We are with Tauranga City Council tonight. Now, we have asked viewers to send us their questions of what they want to know from their potential new mayor. And we have had a viewer send in a question about Greerton. It's from a Greerton resident, so we take one guess what that's about. They want to know, what are you going to do about the Greerton Library upgrade, and if you would continue to put it on hold? Richard, would you continue to put it on hold?
No, I have already come out early on and said no, I support Greerton Library. The money's there, and I think the reason I back it more than anything else is the fact that it was promised to the people of Greerton and was voted on, and then 6 weeks later the council reversed its decision and broke the hearts of the people in Greerton. And I think a community should rely upon its leaders to be honest and open, and I believe that the people of Greerton have been treated particularly shabbily with this, and they need a library, and they deserve a library, and if I get into the mayoralty, they will get a library.
Stuart, you were part of that team that cancelled the library.
Well, we didn't, and that's rubbish.
Cancel, you put it on hold, sorry.
It was in the draft annual plan, went out for submission. Slap bang in the middle of that, we had a huge rain event where a number of people lost and had to be evacuated from their homes, and some of them still aren't in them. It's about priority. Yes, I do support the Greerton Library, and yes, it will be constructed next year. The money is not there. 1.8 million is there through development contributions. My view is we need to sell property that was associated with the proposed Greerton Library, and then with some extra money that will make it happen. But it's not all there at the moment. The other thing is, one must remember there is a library at Greerton. You have a perception that there isn't one. There is one, it's just a little substandard. And so we intend to create 900 square metres of a new library to replace the old one. And so, yes, it has taken some time to get there. But, you know, when I stand up on a stage and have to face 44 people that have lost their homes, 700 people that have been displaced, you know, there is a thing called priority.
Mike, what do you think is that priority?
In principle, I do support the expansion of the Greaton Library, but there could well be other priorities that come along that may mean that it may have to be delayed, such as rising interest rates. Could be a classic. Other issues facing the city, really, until I see all of the numbers, which I haven't had the opportunity to do so. Also, too, I think it's really important. It's all very well for the building to cover the building cost of the library. It's the ongoing operating expenses that become a constant source of expense to ratepayers. One assumes that if you're doubling the library, there will need to be more staff, and one would also assume there's going to be more books. We're not hearing much about that at the present time. We're being told that there won't be a need for maybe more than one staff member, and there won't need to be any books, additional books, even though they're doubling the size. I've got to see the figures before I agree to it, but in principle I do support it.
Another common one was Bay Park, and does it currently work for what Tauranga needs in a stadium? Stuart.
We purchased Bay Park to put our indoor event centre there, the ASB Arena, which has been a tremendous success, phenomenal success actually. Bay Park, the stadium part, was never designed to be a rugby stadium. It's a world-class speedway stadium with a bit of grass in the middle. So there's a subtle difference. My view is that will not be the long-term home for rugby or outdoor events. It should be in the CBD. And I do agree that we need to start planning now for the future for a more appropriate facility in the Tauranga Domain, and it can be achieved there.
Mike?
I think that the purchase of the Bay Park Stadium from Bob Clarkson for $12 million was probably potentially one of the buys of the century. What we inherited there by buying that, a stadium that sits 20,000 covered, huge amount of parking space. With the addition of the Tech Arena now, it is a fantastic place. It's accessible to people. I agree with Mayor Crosby that longer term it's not a desirable place to have the rugby, but we've got other issues we're facing, and it's easy to sit there and say we'll build this and we'll build that. It'll all add to debt, and debt's one of our elephants in the room, so we just got to do everything in balance.
Richard, do you think the stadium suffices what Tauranga needs?
No. It's a great speedway track, as Stuart said, but as far as football is concerned, whether it be league, rugby or soccer, it's not up to it. I think we need to look to the future, provide some land for a stadium, get people together who know what they're doing to plan for it, and then when the city can afford it, which is not in the next 3 years, we then move towards building a proper stadium for football in the city.
Well, that does bring us to the end of our show for our first Mayoralty Candidate special. Thank you very much to Stuart Crosby, Mike Baker and Richard Moore. Thank you very much for coming in, gentlemen. Don't forget, tomorrow night we will have the other three candidates, Calvin Clout, Terry Leeming and John Robson. You will be able to watch this episode again if you wish to on our website tvcentral.co.nz. I'm Hilary Entwistle. Have a lovely evening and remember to vote on October the 12th.
This has been an Alpha Media production, a division of Television Media Group.
Supporting local content so you can see more of New Zealand on air.